are these people?
Yeah, I
This guy right here.
figure this will probably be our headline story tonight, I guess. And I'm sure more people will come in now as I think other streams are ending probably at this point now. Not sure how. Actually, you could guys say this if you're watching the GOP debate. Let us know how it is. As we said, I had no idea that was happening tonight up until maybe a few hours ago. But anyway, so I've said this before and I'll say this again. Sometimes Twitter can leave gems. And I happened to come across this gem while trying to think of stories early in the week. And what's special about this is that this is a Substack article. This is written by Jim, as he's known on Twitter as Jim Kavanagh, also known as the Polemicist. So I retitled this, but for this segment, but I titled it "The Ironclad Commitment," featuring Cornel West. Hold on, let's see if there we go. But his actual title for his article is "Cornel West on Jimmy Dore and Briahna on Kyle and Krystal, who's a default Democrat." And like I said early in the intro, I think he definitely brings up a couple of points that up till now, I haven't heard any independent media personality who has interviewed Cornel West ask. And I think moving forward needs to be asked in order to determine the viability of his upcoming campaign, especially given the idea that now Peter Dow is now campaign manager, I would argue, / communications director for this campaign. Go ahead.
No, it's just fucking making disgusted noises at Peter Dow.
Okay. But anyway, this is kind of a long one, so I'll get to it. But Jim writes, there were two energetic political conversations, well, now 2 weeks ago, that have been the subject of much discussion in the lefty blogosphere. The Jimmy Dore exchange with Cornel West and the Kyle Kulinski Krystal Ball conversation with Briahna Joy Gray. It's worth clarifying what I think is the essential issue in both of these exchanges. On the face of it, they were very different. In the Kyle Krystal Briahna conversations, the issues were, one, whether Cornel West should be running as a third-party candidate rather than as a Democrat challenging Joe Biden within the Democratic Party, with Kyle and Krystal arguing for the latter, and two, whether or not
embarrassing yourself?
Whether or not there is a substantial reason for leftists to vote for Joe Biden, who it was presumed would be the Democratic nominee next November.
Grow up, get serious.
With Kyle and Krystal arguing that Biden had surprisingly earned their support, and Briahna staunchly refusing. In the Jimmy Dore Cornel West conversation, on the other hand, no one was arguing against Cornel running for a party, and no one was arguing for voting for Biden. Jimmy supports Cornel's third-party run, and Cornel continually states his objection to milquetoast liberal Biden and never explicitly suggests that anyone should vote for him. Dore was somewhat clumsily pressing Cornel West on something else, and he did so in a way that lost focus and allowed the conversation to get sidetracked. And I actually do agree with this, and I actually have talked about that before. I felt, they spent too much time talking about things that should be assumed and actually get onto issues, which I think that kind of lacked.
Cornel brought that conversation up.
True.
If you go back and watch the interview, Cornel starts with that conversation of lesser evilism.
But I think Jimmy kind of leaned into that, and it just became
that's like what it
certain
was.
Topics that they talked about was several minutes too long. They didn't need to go about whether Biden is more fascist than Trump. No one cares. Well, we care, but we both know they both suck. Next.
Right. And the issue is that
actual shit.
His conversation was terrible in that regard.
Right.
To the point where Jimmy was shocked and had to keep questioning. Anyway.
there's a specific, precise question that Jimmy could have asked, which would gotten the answer about Cornel's campaign that I think he was looking for. I should say, first of all, that I know Cornel West. We were colleagues at Princeton together back in the day and ran in the same social and intellectual circles. He's a great guy. I respect him enormously, and he certainly has the best overall political position of anyone now running for president.
Hey, you haven't looked at Afro Man's like thing. I'm just saying, you know, he's not the only black guy running. Afro Man exists. I know he's a joke, but he's there.
Nonetheless, there are important issues regarding the relation of Cornel and the Green Party's campaign to the Democratic Party and Biden, or whoever is the Democratic nominee, that Jimmy was trying to get at, and that a lot of people on the left, myself included, want to understand precisely. Jimmy Dore missed the opportunity to pose a key question that would have clarified that. It's a question that we and Cornel should know the answer to. Oh, wait.
He sent him an email. Yeah.
So I asked him, on Monday, September 11th, I sent Cornel an email asking this question. Will you actively campaign for every vote in every state, no matter who the Democratic and Republican nominees are, and no matter what effect that has on either of them? Or come the crunch in November when we are told the outcome in 4 states will decide the election, because that's what happens.
Yep.
Is there some possibility that you will adopt what's been the previous Green Party strategy of saying that voters in swing states should vote for the Democrat in order to stop Trump or whoever is the Republican nominee?
Pause. Something that Cornel has also pushed by himself.
Right.
Like, okay. Yeah.
So, of course, I'm prepared to accept that Cornel is at the moment too busy to answer an email from someone he hasn't seen in years.
So no response is what we're hearing.
Then, in the development last week, 2 weeks ago, that surprised and caused more brouhaha among lefties, Cornel appointed Peter Dow as his new campaign manager. Even more surprising to some, that was done on the advice, she says, of Jill Stein, who, quote unquote, didn't know of Peter Dow in his days as DSC defender, end quote. I won't comment specifically on this other than that to say that either Dow's radical break with his horrible Clinton-like political past is sincere or it is not. We will see. I have an open mind about that, but whether Dow is reformed or not, a lot of leftists are turned off by this decision. Compton J of Revolutionary Blackout Network, for example, where he says, this is no different than Cornel picking Briahna in the beginning. This is like putting a reformed KKK member in charge of a movement to liberate Black people. It's great that you are reformed, but in no way should you be in a supervisory advisory position. I hope Cornel's decision was based on more awareness of these considerations than Jill's recommendation.
Nope.
We'll see. Relevant to my discussion here, Dow's appointment gave me another address for my question, especially when I saw this tweet. So this was a tweet that he sent on the 12th. Our ironclad commitment. Cornel West will be on the ballot next November. There'll be no dropping out and endorsing a Democrat. We're here to oppose the system, not to reinforce it. So I immediately replied to Dow. I'm a colleague of Cornel West from Princeton, though I haven't seen him in years. I mailed him this question, though I expect he's too busy to respond. It's not a question of whether he will drop out, but whether he will adopt a safe state, swing state strategy, either explicitly, or implicitly. Here's the question. Will you actively campaign for every vote in every state, no matter who the Democratic and Republican nominees are, and no matter what effect that has on either of them? Or come the crunch in November when we are told the outcome in 4 states will decide the election, Is there some possibility that you will adopt what has been the previous Green Party strategy of saying or implying that voters in swing states should vote for the Democrat in order to stop Trump, whoever is the Republican nominee? Can you answer that directly and definitely on his behalf? I am planning on publishing an article or video Wednesday evening that includes a discussion of Cornel's campaign, and I want to understand and communicate the campaign's position accurately.
And that was September 12th.
That was September 12th.
Yeah.
I think this is a crucial question, the answer to which will tell Jimmy and the rest of us exactly what we want to know without veering off into arguments about fascism and white supremacy. In fact, I know it's a crucial question for many leftists who support Cornel is seeking, because a slew of them responded to my tweet thusly. So this is at DieMaximumMe. My vote for the doctor hangs on the answer to this question. My vote is for a thumb in the eyes of both parties. I want to vote and for it to count and for it to be for neither of them. At Mystic Mind 17 says, that is the question. I'm pretty sure he won't answer it if anyone has the courage to ask. Here's at Redemption UBI. If this happens, I'll 100% vote Trump and never take the Green Party serious again.
Mm-hmm.
Last one from Prometheus. So your question is, are you running a real campaign or just raising awareness?
Yep.
I have not had a response to that question from either Cornel or Peter. I can believe Cornel is too busy. I do not believe Dow has not seen the chain of responses to his dramatic ironclad commitment.
I don't know. He's got a lot of us blocked. You know, I'm just saying.
It's a question that needs a response. Leftists who are here to oppose the system, not to reinforce it, want to know whether Cornel is in this to do everything he can to build an independent left party and movement, no matter what the cost to either duopoly party, or whether he's in it to raise issues, but with the overriding goal to prevent the Republicans, especially Trump, from winning. In other words, to remain a pressure point on the Democratic Party. I truly do not know what Cornel's answer is. I know that the campaign has to answer it or accept the answer that many presume his silence gives. They must know that every moment not answering that question will cost them supporters. At any rate, the answer will be questioned by November 2024, when, 3 days before the election on MSNBC, Chris Hayes asked Cornel, polls show a dead heat between Biden and Trump in Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Wisconsin. Are you still urging every voter in those states to vote for you? And Cornel answers either simply yes, or gives some complicated version of, I'll like everyone's vote, but I also understand precious people's fear of neo-fascism and the loss of democracy under Trump. I can't tell people how they should vote. I respect everyone's decision.
He left out
that allows him to.
He left out Curtis. He'd somehow pull that back to Curtis Mayfield. You know he would.
Okay. This also sounds like what Jordan Charlton would say. Honestly. Like, and has said.
Or any of these people. Yeah.
Right.
I mean.
The hoes be knowing.
Something that allows him to say he didn't drop out or endorse a Democrat, but sends a message of system reinforcement that everyone understands. Not to do that is the ironclad commitment my question asks for, and Cornel West and Peter Dow know they have not given. Please note that this question gets to the core of what both the Jimmy Cornel and Kyle Krystal Briahna conversations are about. The answer to this question tells us how different Cornel West actually is from the people who are criticizing him for being a third-party candidate, like Kyle. Kyle led the attack on Cornel for running third-party rather than Democrat, but he also says that he's going to vote for Cornel West in New York because it's a safe state. For Kalinske, then, running in the third party is actually good if it only has a political effect in safe states. So if Cornel does not make the ironclad commitment to endanger the Democrats in swing states, he and Kyle are on the same page. They're on the same political page about the relation of leftist politics with the Democratic Party and the duopoly, which is a lot. This is something that leftists to whom Cornel is making a pitch want to and should know. You're in agreement.
Well, just the fact of, I mean, you've said this before too, is who is Cornel trying to get votes from?
Right.
Is he going for shit libs, or is he going for fucking the people who actually matter? You know, I think that's what Jimmy was trying to get to the bottom of too, is like, what are you going to give me? You know, like, what's your plan? Do you have a plan?
Right.
How are you actually going to fix things? Or is this just a book tour?
Right.
You know, which a lot of us already know the answer to this, because electoralism bad anyway. So,
right.
You know, but yeah. I mean,
so anyway, we'll continue. So I wish Jimmy had asked Cornel that question, the answer to which would clarify what he was trying to get at in challenging Cornel. Dore may feel that the logic of the distinction Cornel was making between Biden and Trump implies that Cornel will, indeed must, adopt that safe state, swing state strategy.
I think that's in his thinking. It's Jimmy was more after what does he think, not what is he going to like, what the plan is, minute like details of that. You know, it's like, are you still under the impression that there is lesser evils here? Like, which obviously he does. You know, so in and of itself, that speaks to Cornel, not even the Cornel campaign.
Right.
So I feel you, but also, you know, well,
again, this is,
I know, yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, you don't have to agree with, but I mean, so far, you know, like,
he's pretty close.
Of what we've said, what I've said, or tried to say in a way that if I was more articulate, that I would be able to say something like this. But he also brings up something that I don't think anyone has necessarily brought up. It's the idea of like, is he ironically doing the swing state strategy that Kyle has been preaching about?
Yeah.
So, which he argues, if he is, he's more aligned to Kyle. Therefore, that kind of goes into what you're saying. He's probably running to get PMCs on board.
I think that's where he's at too. I think that's where Cornel's thinking is at. He's been in that bubble for so fucking long that it's hard to see things differently. Like he doesn't, his COVID stuff is not great, you know, as far as what he thinks about it, you know. Same thing with Russia.
We talked about with the child tax credit last week, what he said about to RBN regarding that he gave Brian credit for doing something which he should not have given him credit for.
He needs to fucking
get serious.
He needs to grow up, get serious. Like, people are way past this thinking already. You know, you got to catch up. So,
anyway, let's go on. I too feel that may be Cornel's ultimate position. So I guess this is safe state, swing state strategy. But I'm not sure, and I'd like Cornel to answer it. It's certainly my point of view that no independent left-third party in the United States will get anywhere until and unless it makes Democrats lose elections. The purpose of a third party is precisely to defeat the Democrats as well as the Republicans.
Right.
The Green Party has been problematic for leftists, and there are all kinds of reasons why third parties may be doomed within the US electoral system anyway. But as a general principle, a third party that is not willing to, does not understand it must make Democrats lose elections, is a third party that will never go anywhere. It's just a pressure point on the Democratic Party. This goes to the central point of how one understands the relationship between the left and the Democratic Party. We have this bizarre notion in the United States that there is some intrinsic relation between the left and the Democratic Party, that leftists are naturally closer to the Democrats. It goes back to the aura surrounding FDR, but has been repeated among cohorts that gravitated to the Democrats because of Nixon and Watergate or Bush and Iraq, forgetting things like the Party of the Klan, the LBJ and Vietnam.
Also, FDR wasn't great either. Like, it was okay in some very niche aspects, you know. So,
most leftists today consciously understand that in the post-Clinton Democratic Party, the progressive, social, or peaceful international party they may have been seeking is gone, baby gone, and never coming back. Still, there lingers in many an unconscious, implicit belief that there's something in the Democratic Party as an institution or in its nominee personally, some essential quality, no matter how well hidden, that is or wants to be a force for significant progressive change, and that the Republican Party is a primary obstacle to any such change. Therefore, in the political contest between the Democrats and Republicans, the left must ultimately support the Democrats as the only possible check, as the only politically possible check against the essentially more reactionary Republicans. This is the notion that leftists are default Democrats.
Any blue will do,
right.
if you will.
This is a pernicious, paralyzing assumption that we must extirpate from our minds.
Extirpate? Exactly. Yeah, sure.
Extirpate. Yeah. Being a leftist has nothing to do with being a Democrat. The political left and right, in my understanding of it, do not correlate with Democrat and Republican. They correlate with class positions.
Which goes back to Jimmy's original argument.
Right.
That everyone was upset with. You reword it, everyone's fine with it, though. Like, okay. Literally, you just move the sentences around.
As some of us have known for a long time, and it's now clear to most leftists, the Democratic Party is not the party of or for the working class. If it ever was, it has now, as Chuck Schumer has stated, explicitly renounced any such role. It now strains, and only intermittently, to attract working class support, precisely because its programs and politicians do not advance working class interests against those of corporate and financial capital, and in some way that is more crucially different from the Republican Party. Despite any conjuring of the ghost of FDR, the Party is, as increasing numbers of Americans recognize, an enemy of the working class. Despite any prior demonizing of Bush, the Democratic Party fully internalizes his warmongering imperialist spirit and is an enemy of world peace. It is therefore not a party of the left. And the idea that there's any natural connection between being a leftist and supporting Democrats, that leftists are default Democrats, is ridiculous and maniacal in our minds. We absolutely must do away with that. Extirpating that persistent and pernicious assumption from people's minds is, in fact, one of the most important missions of any independent left third-party movement. The intrinsic relation between the Democratic Party and the left is that they are enemies. The Democrats know this, and leftists should. The Democratic Party is not an essential more progressive institution than the Republicans. Its job is to be, and it is, as Glenn Ford of Black Agenda Report said, the most effective obstacle to any serious progressive reform. It does that by co-opting the movements for such reform and killing them, as it did with Medicare for All, the prime example, or the UAW strike right now.
Right.
Which, as an aside, it's ridiculous that people are saying, oh, Biden is based because he went. Bitch went for what? 15 minutes. Walked the picket line for what? 10? and spoke for like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And you call that solidarity. And you call that, well, that's great, but and like there's a reason why, again, aside, there's a reason why this is called historic. Because back in the day, I'm sure people understood that the idea of having a political figure at your strike will kill the movement. And we talked about this with Smalls 2 years ago. Well, 2 years ago now.
We talk about it with Randy Weingarten. We talk about it with that. I mean, pick a union. Like, they all have this problem in one way or another, like politicizing themselves. And it's similar to how Cornel is politicizing himself. You know, like this is what Jimmy was trying to get to. Is like, are you actually going to stay to class politics, or are you going to fall into democratic identity stuff? Are you going to, like, you know, because that's where he's headed with the way he's been talking.
And I will prove that sort of later. But anyway, talking specifically about Biden or Trump, neither candidate has any claim by any leftist metric to be substantially better than the other. Joe Biden is a proudly reactionary politician who, over his 50-year political career, has done more damage to the American people, to the multiracial working class, particularly to Black Americans, and to millions of people around the world than Donald Trump has done or is likely to do. I repeat, by any leftist metric, by far. I dare anyone to argue otherwise, and people will. But we won't hear because we agree. There's a fundamental difference between the left that understands itself as default Democrats and the left that's indifferent to the pretension that Democrats are less of an enemy than Republicans. It was nicely demonstrated when Kyle said to Bree, let's just say it's election night 2024. It is all of our worst nightmare, Biden versus Trump. It's going to be Biden or Trump winning. Are you sitting here like, of course, I would prefer Biden win over Trump. And she said, honestly, I don't care. They are living in two different political paradigms. I'm with Bree. I don't know where Cornel is. As I understand it, to be a leftist means precisely not to be in some complicated sympathetic relationship with, but to reject being a Democrat. Of course, these discussions really need to be reconsidered in light of the fact that Joe Biden is not going to be the Democratic nominee in November 2024. His cognitive decline is too fast and too obvious. So what will Kyle and Krystal do with it?
They'll keep him going, bro. Don't worry about it.
I mean,
they have the technology.
That's wishful thinking.
Like, wheelchair presidents have been in wheelchairs before, so, you know, like, they'll make an excuse. So what will Kyle and Krystal do with a Democrat that does not have what they consider Biden's surprising presidential accomplishments, which they say are what made him worthy of their support? Will Cornel find a less different milquetoast liberal more worthy to protect in swing states? As the party comes back into focus as the principal actor, everyone will demonstrate whether their true allegiance is to it or something else. Well, I remember when Kyle used to talk about Obama. You know, like, to me, the things are like, is Biden better than him? So you're willing to throw your support at that guy because you didn't like Obama. Like, you called out what he did, rightfully so. Anyway, we know what happened there.
Actually, Kyle has already answered, endorsing Gavin Newsom, the party's likely replacement, who's net slightly to the left of slightly to the left of Joe Biden. Kalinske instantly replaced praise for Biden's surprising NLRB policy with applause for Newsom's wonderful labor achievements, sectorial bargaining, which is massive for fast food workers. Via text, email, or telepathically, he's getting a memo from the DNC saying, focus on labor issues. We need the unions. Yeah, you need the unions because they actually
They're the only
support
thing
the
that give
Democratic Party.
lefties cred at all. They have to like, yes. Yep.
We'll have to await Cornel West's net appraisal. Don't forget, it's only on domestic policy so-called progressives can make any pretense of significant distinction between the Democrats and Republicans.
Ugh.
No one can any longer make the case that the Democratic Party is any less imperialistic and warmongering than the Republican Party. Kyle going on about how Joe Biden was less likely to get us into World War III was another classic different universe of thought moment. In the universe Bree and I live in, Biden's already got us into World War III. So the core issue in both of these discussions, which you see explicitly in Kalinske and Krystal, and maybe implicitly in Cornel, is whether a leftist is a default Democrat. One votes for the Democrats by default because something about that party is just essentially more leftist or less fascist than the Republicans. Again, from my left position, the Democratic Party has to be understood as the most effective obstacle to any significant social democratic or anti-imperialist policy. They take popular positions, Medicare for all, and forever wars that will win elections, pretend they'll be doing something about them, and actually kill them. Not because Republicans prevent them, but because the Democratic Party itself opposes them. That's what they did with Medicare for all. The Republican Party did not and could not stop a progressive program like Medicare for all, which is enormously popular among Republicans and Democrats, working class. Let's make that clarification. If we had a Democratic president and the Democratic Party and its allied media who were committed to getting it, they would have repeatedly and consistently argued for, explained, promote, and use every political tool to achieve it, half as much as they did to promote Russiagate and impeach Trump twice and send hundreds of millions to Ukraine. The Republicans could not stop it. And the Democrats know that. But we don't. And we don't have a weak version of it. We have the opposite. It is only because the Democrats don't do that and won't do that and are strongly opposed to it, not because the Republicans prevent them from doing it, that we do not now have Medicare for all. If we're ever going to have Medicare for all or any significant social democratic program like it, we have to reject and defeat the party that deliberately and effectively kills such initiatives. Briahna's exchange with Kyle and Krystal about Biden not canceling student loan debt was another case in point. So I enjoyed watching both of these charged exchanges. Bree was brilliant with Kyle and Krystal. Jimmy stumbled and missed a chance to get a precise, on-point answer. But we can see that the core issue in both conversations was the relationship between the left and the Democratic Party, and how that defines the purpose of a third-party campaign. We know what Kyle and Krystal's position is, and I think Cornel should state clearly whether he's ironclad committed to campaigning for every vote in every state, or only in a way that will not allow his campaign to be the reason Biden, the Democratic Party, is defeated by Trump, the Republican Party. That's what I think Jimmy Dore was getting at. That's what would tell us something about how different Cornel is from Bernie or Kyle. That I think is something a lot of leftist inquiring minds want to know.
Sure.
So any thoughts? I know.
Not really. I mean, other than what people already know, you know, I think all those options are kind of bad. I don't think Bree gets it either, you know?
No, but I would say for what I did watch from her interview with Kyle and Krystal, I agree with a lot with what she said, but I don't particularly trust her either because, you know, she's kind of saying it in a way because she's kind of forced to be that opposition to Kyle and Krystal. And as I said, she knows their position. She talked with Krystal about similar shit last year, and Krystal gave similar responses last year. So I don't understand the point of her doing this interview to rehash a lot of the same talking points. The only difference was Kyle was kind of yapping every once in a while and try to be all tough and shit with her.
And also,
with
I don't
Krystal.
think Jimmy necessarily stumbled. I think a lot of people looked for a stumble that he was thrown into. You know, like I think it was more Cornel that couldn't answer direct questions. You know, like.
Would you argue, though, just to play devil's advocate, maybe Jimmy could have phrased things better or
Yeah.
not gone into
Sure.
that rabbit hole with Cornel? Like,
Sure.
being able to kind of drag
I think there
him
was
back
other
down, be
ways
like,
to get to that rabbit hole, but I
Right.
think it ended up with he put identity politics on the table because he couldn't answer it any other way. You
Right.
know?
But I would
So-
also argue with Jimmy, like, there was no need to go down that rabbit hole at all. Like,
that's the issue, and what a lot of people don't know is that Cornel started the rabbit hole, and Jimmy was like, "All right, let's go down it."
Into that,
right?
Yeah, and I would rather, and that's what I was saying earlier. I'd rather him. My critique of Jimmy in that interview is that I'd rather him not gone down that rabbit hole because they spent like too long talking about issues that, at the end of the day, really don't matter.
Yeah,
like I don't give a fuck who's more fascist, Biden or Trump. Can we agree that both of them are bad? If anything, Biden may be worse.
Cornel could have done that. Yes, he didn't.
Yeah, but I think, right, because we know Cornel, again, I say this out of respect for Dr. West, but, Dr. West has to bring an academic stance to everything that he says. He tried to justify, I think in a lot of ways, he was also trying to justify why he was supportive of Biden in the past and as recently as 2020 and trying to move away from that now. But I don't think he's doing a good job, or at least he's not convincing me that he's fully invested in really going in on Biden when he needs to and should do. But so with all of that, and again, for the most part, I mostly agree with what Jim was saying here. I do think he brought up a good point of the question should be like, which kind of goes along. Well, let me say this first. The question should be, is Cornel running to get every vote in every state? To me, that's the priority. And then along with that is, when it's crunch time, and you're going to have people in swing states, because I know certain people are playing this narrative of like, if you're in a safe state, you can afford to vote Cornel. But if you're in a swing state, you probably should vote for whoever the Democrat nominee is. We've heard Kyle say that. We heard other people say that. So this is kind of significant because when Peter was with Sabi a couple of weeks ago, Sabi kind of asked him what their demands are. You would think, in my mind, actually, I'll play it and then we can talk about it. So Go ahead.
So one of the key things that we like to talk about a lot on this show are demands. Like, when you have a movement, you have to have a set of demands. Bernie Sanders, I think if you look back at his political campaigns, everybody knows Medicare for all, right?
Yep.
What would you say is going to be the key topic or the key item here in reference to this campaign and this movement, so to speak? What would you say if you had to say the top 2 or 3 issues that you were going to focus on for this campaign? What would those be? And is there a set of demands?
Okay, the demands and the more nuances of the message I want to leave to Dr. West. I'm an operations person. It's not, I have my personal beliefs and I've shared some with you, but I'm not the policy person. However, let me identify 2 issues right away. The issue of the oppression through this capitalist system of tens upon tens of millions of people, both racial oppression as well, and deep, deep inequality. The people who are forgotten. These are the people Dr. West has always spoken to and about. In other words, centering the people that no duopoly campaign will ever center and focus on. And that's broad, but it is representing and speaking, uplifting the people who are forgotten by the system. As I said, I was doing an interview with a mainstream reporter. And I said, the vast majority of people are suffering. He said, what do you mean most people are suffering? I said, do you have any idea what it's like for the working class to survive in this country, to get medical care, to afford food? So the forgotten people. Another major one, critically important, the climate issue. Now, Dr. West on climate is about 500 steps ahead from what any Democrat or Republican would ever say. The Democrats are equally, if not worse, because under Joe Biden, we have had more oil drilling than under Trump. And this is one of the existential crises of our time, and we're running for the nomination of the Green Party. So I will tell you right now, the climate issue is going to be absolutely central to this campaign because it is one of the great threats of our time. But also the oppression of the people through this capitalist system, this oligarchy in which a few people are running away with everything, and the duopoly serves those people and builds the laws and the structure around them. And the people, the working class is completely forgotten.
So I know I spoke about this clip before, at least online.
Sure.
Like,
well, I can go if you want me to.
Go ahead. Go. I've spoken enough.
It feels like when like you're told when someone spits out reparations to you, right? Where it's like it seems pandering.
Yes.
It's like, oh, I gotta get a Green Party, but like this is just the shallow thinking that Democratic fucking campaign people like. It's green. We got to care about the environment. Is that people's number one issue right now? He also talked about the oppressed and the economics was like what also Cornel would speak to, but no mention of how. How is he going to speak to that?
I felt, and watching this again, this is maybe the fourth time I've seen this part.
Sure.
I felt he was kind of pandering to savvy because talking about like RBM, that's their issues, like helping the oppressed. So he probably felt, look, I need to say those buzzwords to kind of make good with savvy, about, trying to, make myself look good, but as you said, and this is what I was saying weeks ago.
Yeah.
While climate is important, that's not the important thing that voters are going to be voting on. They're going to be voting on the economy. Always.
Didn't we talk about
number one issue?
This is what Jimmy gets frustrated when you don't know the COVID issue. How are you going to talk about Medicare for all when a majority of Americans are heavily distrusting of the medical system right now after they were lied to for the last 4 or 5 years? Like that's an important thing to get right to move forward.
But you would think, and this is the point that I want to kind of connect to the article, I would think your number one priority is ensuring that people are able to vote for Cornel in every state.
Sure.
Like, that was an issue with the People's Party. That was why people wanted him to go to the Green Party in the first place.
Right.
It's because the lack of ballot access. Greens, there's a lot more, but not everyone is guaranteed to vote for Cornel in every state. So wouldn't that be your priority to ensure that as many states as possible are able to have Cornel on the ballot? And what are you going to be doing towards that? But then the bigger question is, as Jim was saying in the article, come let's say October 2024, in these swing states, what is Cornel going to say?
Well, in fact, just having doubt in general, if you are trying to get the voters who are disillusioned with the Democratic Party because of what happened with Bernie, because of that Clinton campaign, because of we wanted to leave the Dem exit literally happened at that Clinton DNC convention. Jimmy was there to cover it. Cornel, I think, was one of the few people who even understood what was happening there. And now he's hiring the guy who literally harassed people for believing in Bernie. Anyway, look. Well, whatever. Just politically naive is what I would call him right now. You know,
either way, we're stuck with him. Well, we stuck with
I'm
him,
not.
like, cause right,
like we don't got to vote. None of you had to vote.
Right.
So,
but I do think the question that Jim posed in terms of what are you going to tell people who live in a swing state? What are you going to say to them? And that's even a guarantee if they're able to vote for him at all, because that should be the priority over anything else. But then formulate policy that you're able to attract non-voters or people who are so disenchanted with the duopoly that they feel they're willing to take the risk,
right,
and vote green, and not to be afraid of or being punked into voting blue because the media will tell them that you throw away your vote if you vote green. It's basically, and like he said, it's basically you're voting green because you're essentially throwing up a fuck you to the duopoly. You don't want to be a thorn on the Democratic side. You want to be a damn sword. You want to stab the motherfuckers.
Mm-hmm.
So really so this has kind of been my concern, but I think in this article, it brought up more of the issues that maybe I may not subconsciously been thinking about, but what was not able to articulate. It's the idea of like, how are you going to convince people to make that risk voting for you, assuming that they're able to vote for you at all? Like, what's your pitch? And right now, I haven't heard anything at this point besides more of the classical shit that we see every politician do.
Yeah.
So,
and you're gonna have to
I'm going to continue
outside of the box thinking if you're gonna get anything here. So, and I don't see that right now, and Collin doesn't see that right now.
Right now we're seeing Cornel kind of doing. Yeah, okay. He went to the UAV strike first,
but so did Biden. So did like that's just a photo op. Like,
right. So
what are you doing to actually support them? Like, how are you supporting the strikers? Are you saying give to the campaign? Like anything? But anyway, like Indy in the chat, how does Cornel sound different from the squad? He really doesn't. Like they say the same shit.
If anything, he's using the same tactics.
Yeah. So he was there to write the tactics to begin with.
Right.
Like,
but I'm the asshole, and I've been continued to be called an asshole online, and people who are saying, "Oh, you don't organize," I do, and I can speak to that.
Just innocent man.
Like, you know, but I continue to get shitted on online because I have criticisms for their idol, the newest idol.
You're tearing me apart, Lisa.
But yeah. Anyway,
well, what I no, I know. Normally we don't.
Normally we don't do stories like this, but I think the Cornel thing has kind of died down somewhat. But I think this was important to kind of, and actually in a way, I wanted to do this to kind of be a little ahead of the game, because I'm sure people will kind of get the point too late.
Yeah.
And we will be like, well, we talked about this a year ago.
Yeah.
And, you know, and we were kind of on the ball right from then. So, you know, I'm pretty sure that's the epiphany for most folks will happen soon enough. But I just feel like there's too much support for Cornel and not enough critique to really push him to actually be better and to really stand out against the duopoly. Because right now it just feels like
people are just going through the motions.
You're just floating right now. Yeah, you're just floating right now. Like, what do you plan to do? Like, your biggest thing right now is ensuring that you're getting on the ballot in every state, ideally. And even with that, how are you going to convince people who never voted green in their damn life to make the risk to vote green? That's what you should be working on. Not talking about climate change and a vague definition of oppression, which, sorry, Sabby, if I was you, I would have pushed that. What does that mean?
Right.
Like,
what does that justice look like for you? How are you going to get it?
Right.
Like, it's 2 questions away at most before you really depressed at the answers he gives, because he might not have them. So anyway,